take a couple of minutes to talk about inmates who become successful, inmates who turn their life around. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of inmates or people who are formerly incarcerated that have turned their life around that came across my path. And we know there's many, many more like it. You know, you hear a lot of negative talk about correctional officers, and you hear negative talk about inmates. And don't we all know that on both sides of the coin, there are a lot of good ones out there, and they can turn their life around? Today I want to talk about those inmates. This is True Prison Stories, and I ask you to subscribe if you like this video. Now, I personally know two inmates who have become very successful. And excuse me if I use the term inmate, but my entire 28.8 year career, every piece of paper that I ever came across or classification that I came across has inmate so-and-so. So that's the only term I am used to. I have been told by some that I would rather be called a formerly incarcerated person. Either way, I use the term today. I mean no disrespect, but I'm trying to get a point across. So let's please not get too caught up on a play of words, okay? The first inmate I'm going to talk about, he was sent to a juvenile program in lieu of jail or prison. Now, he was right on the verge of being old enough to go to an adult prison, but the judge sentenced him to a program I was at, and it was a 9-month program. And if he succeeded, he did not have to go to jail or prison. But he still did a crime, and he still had to do his time. This was just another way to do the time. There was 4 stages to the program. Well, at a certain stage of the program, he became under my supervision for my 12-hour shift. Of course, there was another officer the next 12 hours, and then there was another shift when we had our days off. So he actually had 4 of us who were supervising him and the squad bay that he was on. And this 9-month program, they stayed there 24/7 because, remember, they could have went to jail or prison in lieu of this program, so they weren't allowed to go home. They did have visitation and some educational programs that we put them through. If they succeeded, they got a certificate of graduation. They left there with a high school diploma, and they left there with either a horticulture certificate or a fish hatchery certificate, you know, or things of this nature that were available to them to learn from and use once they left. Well, this particular person is now making 6 figures a year in New York. And he has a business, and about 6, maybe more than that now, but the last time I spoke with him in 2018, he had 6 units out on the road in New York City, each with a dog, a bug dog they call it. Not a canine, but a bug dog. And what he does, when these big companies come into New York and they bring this clothing in for these shows, some of these dresses and suits for men are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He gets paid big money to take these bug dogs into these elaborate hotels in New York and make sure there are no bed bugs. And then the hotel gets a certificate showing they're free of bed bugs, and then the hotel gets this business from these big fashion shows. Sometimes he gets paid by the people who run the fashion shows, and sometimes he gets paid by these luxurious hotels. And he's kept in touch with me and thanked me. Let me tell you, he was on a rough road. He had done some things that looked like, is he going to make it or is he not? I'm very proud to say that I was a part of a positive influence in his life, and that he still talks to me about it. And when I went to New York in 2018 to do a part in a show up there, in a miniseries, he took my wife and I on a tour of New York. We'd never been there before. Spent the entire day with us, took us to breakfast, and took us on a tour that some people pay $600 to $800 for. Except he lived there in New York and knew New York very well. And he had moved from Florida to New York, obviously, to be there to do this. And he showed us his business and how successful he is. And he's just been on the straight and narrow ever since. So there's one example. I don't like to hear when someone says all inmates are bad and all inmates are no good and they'll never be any good. That's just not true. Okay? Look at my thumbnail here, you know. Look at Iron Man on my thumbnail. He was once a drug addict in the LA County Jail. Is he not a success story? He's not hurting anybody. He's turned his life around. Another success story, there's a person that I know that was incarcerated in New York, upstate New York, and he was incarcerated, I believe, 9.5 years. And, you know, things were looking bleak, but guess what? He is now a casting director, and he's also been hired by movie makers to help the prison and jail scenes in movies be more realistic. And he worked on the set of Escape at Dannemora, and when they needed a control room officer for one of the episodes, he mentioned me, and I didn't have a speaking part, but I had a small part in episode 5, Escape at Dannemora miniseries on Showtime. This person that I'm speaking of is doing great in life now. Just another example of someone I personally know. Now, if you're an officer and saying, oh, you're friends with these people? Well, yes. They're not in prison anymore. They're not under supervision, under probation supervision any longer. They're free people just like you and I. And they have actually turned their life around. They're making more money than you and I. They're doing better than many of us out there. Okay? Give credit where credit is due and stop being blindsided by this. I can't talk to a former inmate. I can't have a former inmate as a friend. You can. Now, locally here in Florida, do I have people that are friends that at one time were in jail? Yes. One time maybe in prison? Yes. But believe me, they're not bad people anymore. They've turned their life around. Am I going to be a friend with somebody that I know is on drugs? No. Am I going to be a friend with somebody that I know is harming people? No, just the opposite. I'm going to do something to stop that, right? That's what I did for 38 years in government. I'm going to stop someone from committing crimes. I'm going to report them, obviously. Stop being scared to say a former inmate or a former incarcerated person, whichever term you like, has succeeded. The examples I just gave you of those two people, they make more money than I'll ever make. But I'm glad I did what I did as a correctional officer for 28.8 years. I'm glad that there's some people out there that have come back to me and said thank you for believing in me. Thank you for guiding me. You know, that's all I can do as an officer. I can tell you, look, you can do it, you can do it. Put yourself to the test, you can change your life. I can't make them do it. They do that on their own. But I can put some bugs in their ear, right? No pun intended about the bug story. I just want to take a few minutes to get that out there. You folks have to loosen up a little bit. Yeah, we're going to report crime. Yes, we're going to stop crime. That's our job. Our job is also care, custody, and control, and to try to help some of these folks get on the right track. So, like I said before, here on True Prison Stories, you're going to get the good and the bad and the ugly, because if I didn't tell you stories from all angles of prison and jail, how in the world can I title my YouTube True Prison Stories? If you want to hear all inmate stories, go to an inmate YouTube. If you want to hear all goody things about correctional officers, go to one of those correctional channels. On this channel, you're going to get the good officer stories, the bad officer stories, the good inmate stories, and the bad inmate stories. Okay? That's the way it is. I'm not here for a popularity contest. Okay? I'm just here to tell some true stories. Thank you very much for watching Gary York True Prison Stories. Please subscribe.